In the heart of a sun-drenched kingdom named Gleamshire, there lived knights of every shape and size. Gleamshire was famous for its knights, and the knights were famous for their armor. It was a spectacular sight. When they stood together, their polished steel suits captured the sunlight and scattered it into 1,000 dazzling rainbows. Their helmets shone like mirrors, their chest plates gleamed like polished silver, and their very presence was as bright as a summer's day. This shine, everyone in Gleamshire believed, was the outward sign of a knight's inner bravery. A bright knight was a brave knight. But among these brilliant figures, there was one knight who did not shine. His name was Sir Glimmer. He was as dedicated and as kind-hearted as any other knight, but his armor was stubbornly, frustratingly dull. It was the color of a pebble on a cloudy day. He would spend hours polishing it with the finest cloths and strongest pastes, scrubbing until his arms ached, but it made no difference. His armor simply refused to gleam. He watched the other knights practice in the courtyard, their movements creating flashes of light, and he felt a heavy sadness in his heart. He didn't feel like a real knight. He felt small and unseen, as if his lack of shine meant he lacked the courage that was so celebrated in his kingdom. He worried that his light, his bravery, was just too small to see. One evening, while sitting in the castle library and trying to find a new polishing technique, Sir Glimmer stumbled upon a forgotten legend in an old, dusty book. It spoke of the Whispering Woods, a mysterious and ancient forest that bordered the kingdom. Deep within this forest, hidden in a secret clearing, lay the Sunstone. The legend claimed this stone held the light of 1,000 sunsets and had the power to make any metal it touched shine with an unbreakable, brilliant light. As he read the words, a flicker of hope ignited within him. If he could find the Sunstone, he could finally have armor that shone like everyone else's. He could prove once and for all that he was a true and courageous knight. The Whispering Woods was known to be a spooky and confusing place, filled with twisting paths and strange sounds, and the thought of going there alone sent a shiver of fear down his spine. But the desire to find his shine was stronger than his fear. That night he made a decision. He would venture into the Whispering Woods and find the Sunstone. He packed a small satchel with a water skin, a loaf of bread, and his softest polishing cloth just in case. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky, Sir Glimmer, the knight whose armor didn't shine, quietly left the castle and headed towards the dark silhouette of the woods. His quest for courage had begun. The edge of the Whispering Woods was just as daunting as the stories had described. The trees grew tall and thick, their branches intertwining to form a dense canopy that blocked out most of the morning sun. The air grew cooler, and a hush fell over the world, broken only by the sound of a strange, constant whispering. It sounded like the rustling of a million dry leaves, even when there was no wind. Sir Glimmer took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs, and he took his first step onto the mossy path. For the first hour, the journey was simple. The path was clear, and the whispers were soft, almost friendly. But soon the path began to fade, disappearing into a low-hanging fog that clung to the ground. He had reached a place the old maps called the Gloomy Gully. The fog was thick and gray, much like his own armor, and it swallowed the light, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. The whispers grew louder here, seeming to swirl around him, murmuring sounds that reminded him of his own doubts. They seemed to say he was not bright enough, not brave enough to be there. A cold wave of fear washed over Sir Glimmer. His heart beat a little faster, and his first thought was to turn back, to return to the safety and light of the castle. What was he doing here? He was just a dull little knight in a big, scary forest. He stopped, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. He felt very small and very alone. He closed his eyes and thought about the other knights, their armor so bright it could chase away any shadow. His couldn't even shine in the full sun. But then he remembered why he had come. He remembered the heavy feeling of being unseen, and the spark of hope he had felt when reading about the Sunstone. He knew that turning back now would feel even worse than being lost in the fog. This was his chance to change things. He decided that even if he was scared, he had to keep moving forward. That was perseverance. He opened his eyes, focused on the small patch of ground right in front of him, and took one slow, deliberate step. then another. He couldn't see the end of the gully, but he could see his next step, and for now, that was enough. He walked for what felt like ages, listening to the thump of his own steady heart instead of the doubting whispers. Slowly, ever so slowly, the fog began to thin, and sunlight trickled through the leaves above. He had made it through. After leaving the gully behind, Sir Glimmer felt a small sense of pride. He had been scared, but he hadn't quit. His journey led him next to a wide rushing river that cut through the forest floor. There was no bridge in sight. The only way to cross was a line of slick, moss-covered stones that peeked out of the fast-moving water. The river churned and gurgled, a loud and intimidating sound. Sir Glimmer approached the bank cautiously. He placed his foot on the first stone. It was wobbly and slippery. He took a nervous hop to the second, and his foot slid. With a yelp, he tumbled into the icy water. The current was strong, and it pulled at him, but he managed to grab onto the stone and pull himself back to the bank, sputtering and soaked. He sat on the damp grass, shivering. The river seemed impossible to cross. Doubt, cold and heavy like the river water, began to fill his mind again. He felt like giving up. Maybe the whispers were right. What would you do if you were Sir Glimmer? Would you try again? As he sat there feeling defeated, he noticed something small and bright near the water's edge. It was a tiny firefly, struggling against a breeze coming off the river. Its little light flickered and dimmed, but it never went out. It pushed against the wind, its wings beating tirelessly, determined to continue its journey. Sir Glimmer watched the tiny creature, mesmerized by its persistence. Its light was so small, so fragile, but it was also incredibly brave. The firefly wasn't the biggest or the brightest bug in the forest, but it kept going. A feeling of warmth spread through Sir Glimmer's chest. He thought, if that tiny firefly can face the big wind, then I can face this river. He stood up, his armor dripping. This time he didn't rush. He looked at the stones, planning his path. He tested each stone before putting his full weight on it. He moved slowly with purpose, his eyes focused on the other side. One stone, then the next. He wobbled, he slipped a little, but he kept his balance. His perseverance was a shield against his fear. And finally, with one last careful step, he was on the other side. He was still wet and cold, but he had crossed the river of doubt. His next challenge was the most confusing of all. He entered a part of the woods where the trees grew in a dense, tangled web, their trunks like the bars of a cage. It was the maze of murmuring trees. The path vanished completely, and every direction looked the same. The whispering sound was at its loudest here, echoing off the trees and seeming to come from everywhere at once. Sir Glimmer walked for hours, turning left then right, but he only seemed to end up back where he started. He was truly lost. Panic began to creep in. He felt a lump in his throat, and the urge to just sit down and cry was overwhelming. He felt foolish for ever thinking he could complete this quest. He was just a knight with dull armor, lost in a forest that was too big and too clever for him. He leaned against a tree, his shoulders slumping. It was in that moment of despair that he heard a faint, chirping sound from above. He looked up and saw a small bird, its wing tangled in a thorny vine. The poor creature was flapping frantically, but it was stuck. Seeing the bird in trouble, Sir Glimmer forgot about being lost for a moment. He carefully climbed the thick trunk of the tree, his metal gloves protecting him from the rough bark. He spoke to the bird in a calm, soothing tone, describing how he was going to help. He gently worked at the thorns, his fingers careful and precise, until the vine came loose. The little bird, now free, chirped a happy sound of thanks and flew to a higher branch. Watching the bird fly away, a sense of peace settled over Sir Glimmer. Helping someone else had made his own problems feel smaller. He realized that panicking wasn't helping him. He needed to be brave in a different way now, brave enough to be calm and think clearly. Have you ever felt scared or lost, and what did you do to feel brave? He closed his eyes and just listened. He focused on the wind, not the whispers. He noticed that the moss on the trees grew a little thicker on one side. He started to see the maze not as a trap, but as a puzzle. Using these small clues from nature, He began to navigate with a new sense of purpose. It was slow, but he was moving forward again. His perseverance was paying off. He was learning that courage wasn't about not being scared. It was about finding a way through the scary parts. After what felt like a very long time, the trees began to thin, and a soft, warm light filtered through the branches ahead. Sir Glimmer pushed past one last curtain of leaves and stepped into a round, sun-dappled clearing. The air was warm and still, and the whispers of the woods were gone. In the very center of the clearing, sitting on a pedestal of green moss, was the sunstone. He had found it. His heart pounded with excitement as he rushed forward. But as he got closer, his excitement turned to confusion, and then to disappointment. The sunstone wasn't a brilliant, glowing gem. It wasn't full of the light of 1,000 sunsets. It was a simple, smooth gray river rock. It was completely and utterly dull. It looked just like a piece of his own armor. All this way, all those challenges for nothing. He had faced the fog, crossed the river, and navigated the maze, all for a plain, ordinary stone. He sank to the ground, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He had truly believed this was the answer. He had believed it would make him shine. He sat there for a long time looking at the useless stone. Dejected, he happened to glance at his reflection in its smooth, polished surface. He expected to see the same dull knight he always saw. But something was different. He didn't just see the gray armor. In the reflection, he saw the face of a knight who had walked into a foggy gully, even though he was afraid. He saw a knight who had fallen into a cold river but got up and tried again. He saw a knight who had been lost and confused but had calmed his mind and found his own way. He saw a knight who had stopped to help a creature in need. He wasn't seeing the armor anymore. He was seeing the journey. He was seeing the courage he had shown. And as he recognized this, a strange and wonderful thing happened. A soft, warm light began to glow from the center of his chest plate. It wasn't a brilliant, dazzling glare like the other knight's armor. It was a gentle, steady golden glow, like the light from a candle pulsing softly in time with his own brave heart. He looked down in astonishment. The light was coming from him. He finally understood. The legend wasn't about a magic stone that made armor shine. The true magic was the journey itself. The sunstone didn't give off light. It showed you the light you already had inside. The courage, the perseverance, the kindness, that was the source of the shine. His light wasn't small or missing. It had just been waiting for him to be brave enough to let it out. Sir Glimmer stood up, his heart feeling lighter than it ever had before. He didn't need the stone. He had found what he was looking for. He turned and began the journey home, his own personal light guiding the way. When he walked out of the Whispering Woods, he was not the same knight who had entered. His armor was still the color of a pebble, but it was now illuminated from within by his gentle, unwavering glow. Back in Gleamshire, the other knights stared in amazement. They had never seen a light like his. It wasn't flashy or blinding, it was warm, real, and full of quiet strength. They didn't see a knight with dull armor anymore. They saw Sir Glimmer, the knight whose bravery shone from the inside out. He had learned the most important lesson of all. Bravery isn't about how brightly you shine for others to see, but about the courage you find to keep your own light glowing, even when the world feels dark. Sir Glimmer's adventures were only just beginning. Having learned the secret of inner courage, he wondered what other strengths he could discover. Perhaps his next quest would teach him how the power of kindness could build bridges that were stronger than any stone, or how creativity could paint a path through any obstacle. Moral core. This story shows that true bravery and self-worth come from perseverance and the light you find within yourself, not from outward appearances. Moral core. This story shows that true bravery and self-worth come from perseverance and the light you find within yourself, not from outward appearances.